What is going on, everyone? It's Nico here, and we are back again with another video now that the NFL Combine has gone down. And I figured that this would be the perfect time to do another mock draft after the Combine, now that some guys have increased their draft stock, or maybe it dropped a little bit based on the way they tested. We also got a lot of news and rumors during the Combine week. So let's just get right into it. And I want to kick things off with a major shakeup at the top of the draft, because I really think the quarterback market shifted in a big way this week. We now know that Matthew Stafford will be staying in Los Angeles after all, and it really seemed like he might get traded to a team like the Giants per se, and it just did not make sense to me for them to ever move on from Stafford when you have the opportunity to compete for a Super Bowl with him next year. So I'm glad everyone came to their senses and worked this thing out, and I think that that could actually have a really big impact on this draft, because now the Giants can't bring in the amazing veteran that they hope for, and I just think that they're going to get even more desperate now to draft a quarterback and maybe trade up, considering that everyone seems to think that the Browns will be taking a quarterback at number 2 overall. So I think Joe Schoen could really get desperate here, sitting at number 3. He knows that someone else may try to trade up for the number 1 pick, and I really think that this is a golden opportunity for the Titans to trade down and just take best player available, because they are earlier on in their regime. They're not feeling the pressure as much to find their quarterback and start winning. They can do the smart thing here and take advantage of a desperate team in the Giants with Joe Schoen. So we are going to do a trade here for the Giants to move up to number 1. And I'm not totally sure what the compensation would look like, but I do believe it would include like number 3, maybe 34 in the early second round, maybe a third rounder next year. You know, I think that would make a fair amount of sense, considering it isn't an amazing quarterback class, but the Giants are still a little bit desperate. I think the Titans can get some good picks out of them. So we are going to do this trade. And with the number 1 pick, obviously, I think the New York Giants are going to take Cam Ward. I just think Cam Ward makes the most sense for the Giants, specifically when you consider the types of quarterbacks that Brian Daboll likes. He likes his mobile quarterbacks. He likes his guys that can be playmakers outside of structure. And, you know, you want a guy with a really big arm that can get the most out of Malik Neighbors and feed him in different ways. They can create a more explosive downfield offense. You know, the deep ball had just been non-existent with Daniel Jones for so long. So, yeah, I think the Giants might get aggressive here and say, yeah, because we can't get Matthew Stafford, we probably don't just want to go sign Aaron Rodgers or something. And we like Cam Ward the most because we think that he can create some fireworks and get people back on board with where this team is going. And then you got the Browns at number 2. And like I said, a lot of the insiders around the league seem to be hinting that they are going to take a quarterback. And when you think about Shedeur Sanders' decision to not do anything at the Combine, he must be feeling pretty good about his stock, right? Because, like, if he didn't think that he was going to be a top pick in this draft, he probably would have felt the need to go out there and put on a show in front of the scouts, but he didn't do that. And I think that all hints that he probably is going to be one of the very top picks in this draft. And I do think the Browns are going to take a quarterback, even though if I were them, I would just trade Myles Garrett away. I would pick a guy like Abdul Carter and start fresh. But that doesn't seem like that's what they're going to do. This is a desperate regime. They want to get a quarterback in there that can maybe execute the system decently. And I think maybe Shedeur Sanders can do that. I personally wouldn't make that pick. But I honestly do think this is probably what's going to happen. I think quarterbacks in the first 2 picks are a reflection of Matthew Stafford staying in Los Angeles, and in general, the Tennessee Titans not feeling the heat to take a quarterback as much as these other 2 franchises. So the Titans at 3 still have a board that they should be very excited about after trading down and getting multiple day 2 picks in the process. And, you know, earlier in the process, they said that they want to take the best player available, take a generational talent. In my opinion, that is the definition of Travis Hunter, and that's the guy that I would take here. But maybe they don't do that. Maybe they do go for Abdul Carter. You know, it seems like maybe a bigger need at edge for the Titans, considering Harold Landry seems like he's on his way out. You know, they've invested at corner with L'Jarius Sneed. They've invested at receiver with guys like Calvin Ridley. So maybe that's the route they go, even though Abdul Carter is dealing with some injuries at this point. They still seem to feel like that's not going to affect his stock too much. So I do still think that he is set to be the number 1 non-quarterback off the board if I had to make that prediction. And then the Patriots at 4 are going to fall into a home run pick of Travis Hunter. I mean, come on, man. You get to either pair him alongside Christian Gonzalez in man coverage defensively, or he's going to be an amazing weapon for Drake May. Like, that is just a home run, man. I would be sick. We cannot gift the Patriots Travis Hunter, but I think that's just kind of the way it could go here, with other teams focusing on maybe needs and maybe the Titans liking Abdul Carter more for themselves than Travis Hunter, considering in what they've invested in. Like, this really could end up falling into the Patriots' favor despite winning that extra game that a bunch of fans were upset about at the end of the season. So the Jags at number 5, no one really knows exactly what the Jags want. Like, we don't really know what position they would go for. I think that they're just going to go for the best player available, and to me, that is 100% Mason Graham. Now, Mason Graham did not have the best measurables at the combine. He's a little bit of a smaller guy. He didn't bench press a ton, but if you just watch the tape, he is an absolute freak game wrecker in the interior, and I just don't think that Jacksonville is going to pass on a talent like that, even though that they have maybe bigger needs on the offensive line or in the secondary defensively. This is a new general manager in James Gladstone, and I think the first thing he's going to want to do with a top 5 pick is just make sure that he picks an outstanding player, and I think that Mason Graham would be an outstanding player for the Jags. So the Raiders at 6. This is one where I really, really do not know what their plan is, because they've just got a lot of different holes. They're not going to go for the quarterback, obviously, now that Cam Ward and Shador Sanders are off the board. So let's just have a little fun here and say, what if they take Ashton Jeanty? This is another new regime with John Spytek at general manager. What if they just want to start this new era of Raiders football off by just saying, yeah, we're going to get the blue chip prospect. We're going to put him alongside Brock Bowers. This is what they did last year, and it was just a massive success. You could get 2 young offensive superstars now to surround your next quarterback with whenever you find that option that you like. I think Ashton Jeanty would be part of a probably successful run game in Las Vegas. They're just building a very strong interior offensive nucleus, if that makes sense, considering some of the pieces they have on the offensive line as well. And then you've got Jeanty and Brock Bowers, and you're putting him into a Chip Kelly run game. This could really be fun. What if they sign Justin Fields and they create some sort of option attack? There are definitely opportunities for the Raiders to make an Ashton Jeanty pick a big success. And I don't know. I think Pete Carroll is a guy who has valued the running back position at times. He likes to run the football. They met at the combine. So I think that you could connect the dots and say that might be what the Raiders do. It would certainly be a very, very fun fit for them at number 6. And Ashton Jeanty, in my opinion, easily a top 3 player in this class at least, ends up going in the top 10 despite the stigma around drafting running backs that high recently. I think this year we are going to see running backs get drafted very high, even though this class is excellent, because Ashton Jeanty is just such a special talent. And we'll get into more of that running back talent later in this mock draft. But at number 7, the Jets are still here, and it's a tough decision. It really is a tough decision. A lot of really good options. That's another new regime. They might just say, yeah, let's just take the best player available. But I still really, really like Tyler Warren, and I really like his fit in this offense with the Lions' influence coming over. We know how they love their physicality up front. We know how the Jets have not had a good tight end in recent years, and they have plenty of skill talent and guys in the trenches to work around. So I really, really, really like Tyler Warren for the Jets. I think that he would really set the tone and just bring a lot to this team that I think the guys in charge are looking for. So yeah, Tyler Warren to the Jets. He's another guy who sat out the combine, and I think we can take that as a implication that he feels really great about his stock, and he feels like he has a good chance to be a top 10 pick, and I think the Jets are definitely a potential landing spot for him. So the Panthers at number 8, I still feel like they're definitely going to take a defender, right? With how bad the defense was last year, even though they were without Derek Brown for most of the year, that's something that they are going to address because they feel good about the direction of their offense at this point. And this is where we're going to talk about the guy who had the best combine of anyone. Texas A&M's Shamar Stewart, man. He put up a 100th percentile relative athletic score, weighing in at 267, jumping 40 inches in the vertical. He had an insane broad jump. He ran a fast 40. He is an absolute freak athlete who at Texas A&M didn't really produce as a pass rusher, but he showed those flashes and was an amazing run defender. So, even if you're not super high on Shamar Stewart, even if you don't think that he's going to develop into the superstar pass rusher, he is going to help the Panthers immediately, being able to defend the run, being able to set the edge. That was a big emphasis for his role at Texas A&M. And just to have such a great combine, I think that the NFL has really shown that they like their huge athletic edge rushers, like we saw a couple years ago with Travon Walker. Like, if you come in and you're this big edge rusher and you're moving like a freak, you're going to go really, really high. And I think the table is now set for Shamar Stewart to be a top 10 pick. So we're going to send him to the Carolina Panthers. The Saints at number 9 are another team that I just don't really know what they're going to do. They have so many different holes. There are a lot of good talents on the board. So I'll just stick with what I had them doing last time, taking Tet McMillan. I think that receiver room is a little bit shaky. We don't really know what's up with the future of Chris Olave with all those concussions. Outside of that, I still think that you could look for another outside receiver, maybe water down Rashid Shaheed's role in the offense a bit, and, just get a good weapon for Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore's offenses, everywhere he's gone, have had star receivers, so I think that might be a big emphasis for the Saints. I think the table is now very much set for the Bears to take a lineman at number 10 because their top target in free agency, Trey Smith, is no longer an option. The Chiefs franchise tagged him. They can't throw him the bag and just think, yeah, we're going to fill a major hole on our offensive line with him. I think now they know that they've got to get a top offensive lineman in this draft if they want this offense to be a big success in year one of the Ben Johnson era and that sophomore season for Caleb Williams. And Ashton Jeanty is already off the board in this scenario, so I think it's kind of a no-brainer to go offensive line at number 10. And I think the table is set maybe for them to take Will Campbell specifically, because at the Combine, he measured in with only 32-inch arms. And most teams say that to be a tackle, you need 33-inch arms. So that's going to inherently drop his value. I think it could cause him to fall outside of like this really high first-round range. I don't think the Patriots are going to take him at number 4. I don't know if any of these other teams like the Jets would actually do it. Probably not. So I think Will Campbell will be on the board. And you might as well take him because you could very well kick him inside and he could very well be an amazing guard for you. But maybe you still want to try him at tackle. Maybe he's an anomaly. Maybe he replaces Braxton Jones. Either way, you're just getting the best offensive lineman on the board. And I think that he would very much help Caleb Williams as a pass protector. He's an athlete. He can really get out and run block. He had a good combine in terms of showing off the way he can move. So yeah, Will Campbell to the Bears I think is a home run for them. And then the 49ers at number 11. They just traded away Deebo Samuel. It actually did happen. I expected it to happen. And, maybe they take Luther Burden. Luther Burden would just be like the easiest possible Deebo replacement at number 11 because of his yards after catch ability. He's one of those bulkier, more compact receivers that likes creating after the catch. But they did just draft Ricky Pearsall with a first-round pick last year. And I think if they really want to contend for a Super Bowl, they're going to address bigger needs elsewhere instead of just trying to immediately replace Deebo. Like, I think they're going to show some faith in all of the other receivers that they've invested in. Ayuk, Pearsall, and even Jawan Jennings. So I think that the Niners are still in a position where they want to compete for a Super Bowl. And I still think that they can go with the best player available in Will Johnson out of Michigan. Charvarius Ward is an incoming free agent. You bring him Robert Saleh. He likes to give his guys opportunities to be a playmaker in off coverage. And I think that Will Johnson would just fit them perfectly and add to a really talented young cornerback room outside of Renardo Green. Like, the Niners are building something fun in that secondary. They've been hitting on a lot of young talent last draft. They had a great draft last year, and I think that they can continue to build on that with Will Johnson. And then you get to the Cowboys at 12. And man, this is still a really good board for the Cowboys, even though I know Ashton Jeanty is the dream, and I think that it could very possibly happen. In this scenario, he is off the board. But I do not think that would necessarily stop the Cowboys from taking a running back in the first round, because I think that Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina is also just a phenomenal, very well-rounded talent. I think he's going to be a first-round pick in this draft. He had a great combine, at 220 pounds. He's running in the 4.4s. He's jumping really well. Omarion Hampton is just a stud. I think he's going to come into the league and be a Joe Mixon type of player. Just a violent, but can hit the home runs. He's good in the passing game. That would really help the Cowboys offense. And I've talked about how the Cowboys, with their coaching staff and Brian Schottenheimer and, bringing in Clayton Adams from the Cardinals, to sort of be a run game savant. Like, they are really interested in bolstering this run game to open up the pass game for Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, to force guys into the box. And if you draft Omarion Hampton with the number 12 pick, you are going to not only really upgrade your running back room from Rico Dowdle as the lead back, but you are going to really punish teams if they're going to put all of their defensive attention on CeeDee Lamb and focus on being strong in coverage and lighten up those boxes. Omarion Hampton could very well be one of the best running backs in football one day. And I think after the Combine, his stock has just solidified himself as a first-round pick. And, the Cowboys have been connected to him. They're going to meet with him. I think that they could very well do that. And I think it would be a very, very fun fit. You don't get Ashton Genty, but you still get a dang good, really well-rounded running back. Maybe even more well-rounded than Ashton Genty, considering his size and his ability to do things in the passing game. He's just a very violent runner that could really set the tone and round out that Cowboys offensive attack. So Omarion Hampton at 12 to the Cowboys. And then my Miami Dolphins are up at number 13. And I like the way this board falls for them because I think the dream pick, Armand Membu out of Missouri, would fall to them in the scenario, and they can take him. And they can make a stern investment in improving the trenches because Armand Membu is going to fit perfectly in that Dolphins scheme. He's a great zone run blocker, so they can be able to run the football. I think that he can maybe even be kicked inside to guard if you want to roll with like Austin Jackson at right tackle. But he gives you that experience on the right side of the offensive line versus the investments that they have elsewhere with a guy like Patrick Paul, another tackle that they spent a high pick on. So I would absolutely love Armand Membu for the Dolphins. I would be very happy with that pick. It would be a very responsible pick. He fits in well. He's a great player. I love it. So the Colts at number 14. I think that we are going to talk about the other absolute superstar of this combine, Nick Emmanwori, the safety out of South Carolina. Unreal combine for him. A 43-inch vertical at 6'3", 220 pounds. He ran a 4.440. Like, this guy is a freak. And, if there's any team in the league that really prioritizes combine performance and just wants to draft those freak athletes who get the high relative athletic scores, it's been the Colts. They spent the number 4 pick on Anthony Richardson. They get that home field advantage with the NFL Combine. Like, they really are a team that prioritizes the results they get, and they have a big need at safety. So I think even though most people, including me, will believe that Malachi Starks is still the number 1 safety in this draft, the Colts might just say, yeah, let's get a freak in there because that's what they've always done. And Nick Emmanwori is still a good player that could help the Colts and just has the potential to be one of the more versatile defensive backs in the entire league. Like, he's a Derwin James, Kyle Hamilton type of body. And there's a lot of stuff that Lou Anarumo could do getting creative with a talent like that. At number 15, I think the Falcons are just absolutely insistent on getting that edge rusher, getting that bona fide pass rusher because of how bad their pass rush was last year. The rumor has it they came to the Combine to just scout defense. Like, they feel really good about where their offense is at. They fired their defensive line coach. Like, it's just abundantly apparent that they are going to address that need in this draft. And I think that Mike Green is a guy who sat out the Combine. He must feel pretty good about his stock. He didn't work out. He's an amazing pass rusher. He could really bring some juice off the edge for them. So I like that pick for the Falcons. The Cardinals at number 16 might not get their pick of excellent edge rushers. That is a big need for them. But let's talk about another guy, Walter Nolan, a freak athlete, a guy who had a good year at Ole Miss. This seems like a guy that is going to end up being a first-round pick. He's another guy that sat out the Combine. Like, listen, I think a big emphasis at the Combine is just paying attention to who doesn't work out, even though they're healthy. That suggests that they don't feel the need to. They feel like they're going to go high. The Cardinals have a need on the interior defensive line. They should just really get any sort of defensive line help. Maybe they go out and sign Josh Sweat off the edge, and then they emphasize the interior a little bit more. So yeah, Walter Nolan to the Cardinals. The Bengals are another team that needs interior defensive line help. There are a lot of different guys that we could see go from the mid-first round to the early second round. And I think maybe their pick would be Derek Harmon out of Oregon, who had a quality combine himself. At 313 pounds, he goes in there and runs a sub-540 yard dash. He looks like better mover than just about all of the defensive linemen in a lot of the drills, despite the fact that he was one of the heavier guys. Like, he really killed it at the Combine. Seahawks at number 18. They could go a lot of different ways. Maybe Mike McDonald wants to get another weapon on defense, like another guy, a linebacker like Jahad Campbell or Jalen Walker, just an explosive pass rusher to get creative with some of those blitzes. But I'm going to stick with what I have been saying and what I had them taking previously. Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State. He's a guy that they could very well plug in inside. He fits well in that Clint Kubiak zone run scheme. They're going to be running the Shanahan offense last year, and I think if you have the opportunity to address how bad your interior offensive line was, you take it any day of the week with a guy like Gray Zabel. So the Buccaneers at number 19, I think when you think about what the Buccaneers might do, I think the need at linebacker is just getting pretty apparent, considering the fact that Levante David is so old. They had like KJ Britt out there. Like, their linebacker play was not good. And there are good linebacker prospects in this draft, guys that people think are kind of freaky athletes, and I think that they might take just Jahad Campbell at Alabama, make him one of their next off-ball guys, because Jahad Campbell is a guy who came in, had a great combine, ran well, had a lot of good jumps, just showed that he is a really big and explosive player. He showed a lot at Alabama. He showed a lot of potential as a pass rusher. You know, he was actually an edge rusher coming out of high school, and if you think about a defensive coordinator that could really utilize that skill set, it's Todd Bowles at head coach, because he loves the blitzes. If he can get Jahad Campbell downhill, that could be a serious weapon for the Buccaneers moving forward. But maybe he really refines his skill set and just becomes a really well-rounded run defending and coverage guy at linebackers. And now we get to the Denver Broncos at number 20. Last time I had them taking Luther Burden. I still think that would be a great selection, but I think if we're being real, they are probably either going to take a running back or a tight end, and I think that they are going to take a tight end here in Colston Loveland out of Michigan, because Colston Loveland can be a real weapon at tight end for them in the receiving game. Like, he is just a big body, fluid route runner that you can move around, you can get working out of the slot, and he could be one of the better, like, slot targets in the league. Big slot, Colston Loveland, get creative with him getting those underneath targets. If you feel good about what you have at receiver and you just want to improve the tight end room that really just did not do much for the Broncos offense last year, Colston Loveland might be their guy, and that would be a big bummer for the Chargers, who would also love to take him as a former Michigan guy for Jim Harbaugh, but we'll talk about that later. So the Steelers at number 21, I think they're going to take a receiver. Like, I think it's just abundantly clear that the guys they have are not going to cut it. You know, they had like Mike Williams and George Pickens. Like, they just don't have enough different skill sets in that room. You can't build an offense around just a bunch of big body deep threats that aren't really good route runners, can't really create after the catch. They got to add some more juice to that room. And I think that they might take one of the biggest risers of the combine in Matthew Golden out of Texas. He is a big winner this week because he came out and ran a 4.29 in the 40. This dude is absolutely blazing. He ran faster than his own teammate Isaiah Bond, who said that he was going to break a Xavier Worthy's record. So did his other teammate Jaden Blue at running back. Those two guys were running their mouths all week, and they didn't end up coming close. Matthew Golden ran way faster than them. He was working in silence. It was just a good week for him. And I think that in general, like, he's just a really impressive talent. The fluidity he has as a route runner and how good he is at the catch point. He made so many clutch grabs for Texas, specifically in the college football playoff. And I think for the Steelers, if you can just get another guy who could potentially be a big-time, well-rounded outside receiver and bring more juice as a deep threat, bring more separation. They don't have a lot of good route runners on that team, but he can still be a deep threat for you, and that's just something that their offense always seems to emphasize, just hitting those shots down the sideline. So Matthew Golden could really actually end up going over Luther Burden. And as much as I love Luther Burden, I can't deny that that's an understandable decision. And I think that Matthew Golden has really emerged as one of the bigger fan favorites in this class, and for good reason. The Chargers at number 22, they don't get to get Colston Loveland, a guy who I've just been penciling in for them over and over and over, because it just makes so much sense considering how their tight end struggled to be an asset for Justin Herbert in the receiving game this year. But what if they just take a different Michigan guy in Kenneth Grant. I don't really know what order a lot of these defensive tackles are going to go in, but I just get the feeling that, guys like him and Derek Harmon and Walter Nolan are all going to go around the mid to late first round. And for Kenneth Grant to fall to the Chargers, well, that just makes sense because he was a guy that Jim Harbaugh coached at Michigan. He's a guy that Jim Harbaugh liked, a guy who had a good year at Michigan without him. And now the Chargers can continue to bolster that defense. They had some good defensive line play this year, but they are getting a little older there. So just to add another body, it just asks a little bit less of everyone, makes it easier on everyone. And maybe they find other ways to improve the offense at receiver or tight end. The Packers at number 23. I think they might take Jahdae Barron out of Texas because there are a lot of rumors that Jair Alexander is on his way out. It's just a big need for the Packers in general. They haven't gotten a lot of healthy play out of Jair, and outside of him, they don't have a lot of talent in that cornerback room. But Jahdae Barron is just an absolute stud, man. He won the Thorpe Award at Texas this year, best defensive back in the country. He's older, and he's a smaller guy, but he goes at the combine. He runs a really good time in the 40. He showed that he's a pretty good athlete on top of just being a very intelligent, physical football player, a great character. And I think a team like the Packers, who's trying to make runs in the playoffs right now, capitalize on Jordan Love's before that contract really kicks in and makes it hard for them financially. You just want to get guys you can plug into that defense and make an impact for you right away. And I think Jahdae Barron could absolutely do that, really help their cornerback room. I think that's a very interesting pick for them. And now the Minnesota Vikings at number 24. I think that the Vikings would love to draft Omarion Hampton and fill that need at running back, especially after the combine he had. But I think the Cowboys or the Broncos are going to take that away from them as an opportunity inevitably. So I think the Vikings may have to go elsewhere. I don't really know if they would take a guy like Trevion Henderson or Quinshon Judkins, even though Quinshon Judkins had a great combine himself. I think they might just say, let's hold off. Let's just take advantage of how deep this class is. Take one of those guys a little bit later on. So I think that leaves you in a spot where you're just like, let's just address the interior offensive line, which is not... Their offensive line isn't a big problem, but on the interior, it could get a little bit better. And why not take Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State, who's just shown amazing versatility? And for a team like the Vikings that have just had poor interior offensive line play, they've suffered injuries. Donovan Jackson is a guy who can really, really help them. You can put him at guard where he'd been playing at Ohio State for a long time. If a guy like Darrisaw or Brian O'Neill goes down, you can give him a shot at tackle where he proved very clutch for Ohio State in the college football playoff. He is just such a stud, well-rounded prospect, a guy who I would trust to come in and immediately help their offensive line. So if you can't get Omarion Hampton, if you can't get one of those interior defensive linemen, I think Donovan Jackson makes a ton of sense for them. He was also good in the zone run game. He's a scheme fit. And I think that's kind of an important factor of the Houston Texans here at 25. Great options for them, It's very tempting to take a guy like Luther Burden with Tank Dell down, and maybe you don't want to resign Stephon Diggs. It's very tempting to take a guy like that who could really be an asset for C.J. Stroud. It's going to be very tempting for D'Amico Ryans to see a guy like Malachi Starks falling and say, yeah, what if we just get another freaky defensive back to put back there and just make our defense even better? But ultimately, above all else, you have to do the responsible thing and really address this offensive line. And especially now that we see that this free agent offensive line class is not looking that great, I think the Texans are going to come into this draft with a big hole on the interior, and they can very easily address that just by taking Tyler Booker out of Alabama. Now, Tyler Booker is a guy who did not have a good combine. He did not run well in the 40s. He did not put up good jumps. He didn't show himself to be like this great mover, even though he's a big fella, big arms. He's got all those traits that you would want physically. Athletically, he didn't prove to be that strong, but I don't think that's as much of a problem for the Texans because they just need a strong body on the interior that can pass protect. They don't really need a guy who can get out in the run game. I think that they're going to be running a little bit more of a gap scheme that just ask their guys to plow downhill, and I think Tyler Booker can absolutely do that. So even though he didn't have a great combine, even though he's not an amazing athlete compared to other prospects in this draft, I think that he would be a big help for the Texans, and they would mask some of those limitations with him athletically plenty fine, and he can help them as they move forward in year 3 with CJ Stroud and try to get a little further in the playoffs. So they address the need with Tyler Booker. And then the Rams at 26, man. Like, this board is just really, really shaking out well for some of these playoff teams. And, you know, there is the glaring Luther Burden on the board just staring at them saying, I dare you to take me. With Cooper Kupp out the door, they have that need at receiver. I like Jordan Whittington, but man, I don't think that they could pass on Luther Burden. You think about the ways that Sean McVay could be creative getting him the football in space. The Rams love their screen game. Luther Burden would be such a weapon for them after the catch. They just like their underneath targets, guys that can really make the physical grabs and guys that can really be physical with the ball in their hands. Luther Burden makes so much sense for the Rams. And now that Matthew Stafford is back, ideally, you address the defense here because that's a much bigger issue, in my opinion, but you just can't pass on a guy like Luther Burden and what he would bring to their offense, in my opinion. So the Ravens at 27, I get the sense that they are going to go offensive line. They might re-sign Ronnie Stanley. We'll see about that. He is 30 years old. Maybe they make the call to move on from him, and it's just an obvious decision to take Kelvin Banks or Josh Simmons. But regardless, why not just take one of them and say, yeah, if Ronnie Stanley goes down, we need to start thinking about the future at tackle, or maybe we can even plug one of these guys and move them to guard. And I think if you're looking for the guy that can help you in a variety of ways, depending on what happens for the Ravens moving forward on the offensive line, I think Kelvin Banks out of Texas is your guy, because at the Combine he said that he's talked and, you know, 6 out of the 19 teams he talked to said that they are interested in him playing at guard. So maybe he's just the Patrick McCarry replacement, and you do re-sign Ronnie Stanley. But either way, Kelvin Banks can help the Ravens. It would be a good pickup for them late in the first round. I don't know if he's actually going to fall that far, but it could very well happen. We'll see. So now the Lions at number 28. This is such an interesting board for them because there are so many good defensive prospects on the board, and I think that they might just say, yeah, with the injuries we've had, both with Aiden Hutchinson and on the interior, let's just get what we think can be the most useful defensive lineman available, a guy who's not necessarily pigeonholed into a certain role, and they just take Mykel Williams out of Georgia, a physical freak, a guy with versatility, a very moldable piece for them, who can just line up in a lot of different ways. And then you get to the Commanders at 29, who just traded for Deebo Samuel. So I don't think that, you know, even if Luther Burden fell, it would make as much sense to take him because that's just a similar role. As I talked about with the 49ers earlier on, I think the table is set now for the Commanders to take someone on the defensive line. It looks like Jonathan Allen might be on the way out. Like, they just need some more talent up front. And let's talk about another riser in this combine, Donovan Iziraku. I hope I pronounced that right. He had a great combine. He's got these long arms. He tested well athletically. He was a good pass rusher at Boston College. They need more off the edge in the pass rush, and I think that he could really help them. I think that's a guy coming out of the combine that might play his way into the first round. And the Commanders have that obvious need to fill. They picked up Deebo. Maybe they take Josh Simmons at tackle. That's also very possible. It is a little interesting that I have Josh Simmons falling here. But the defense was just so much more problematic than the offense. So now the Bills at number 30. Once again, like, this board is just really good for some of these playoff teams just because some of these teams in the middle prioritize need a little bit more. We had that run on defensive linemen. We had running backs get picked high in this draft. So some good prospects are going to fall. And I think for the Buffalo Bills, you just got to take Malachi Starks, right? Like, maybe you take Darius Alexander because I think their defensive line needs improvement more than anything if you want to move forward and compete with the Chiefs. But Malachi Starks is just so enticing. We know how much the Bills' defense thrives with their defensive backs, and they just kind of underwent a safety overhaul with Poyer and Micah Hyde out the door. So if they get a talent like Malachi Starks back there, oh man, that is going to just be an amazing, scary secondary for any team in the league to face. Chiefs at 31 here. I talked about last time how I think the Chiefs might not go tackle because they took Kingsley Sumatia last year. They must have a decent amount of faith, even though he was kind of forced onto the field in his rookie year and it didn't work very well. Maybe you trust the development for him in year 2, but like if Josh Simmons falls out of Ohio State, you might just say, yeah, we're going to move forward with him. He's going to be our plan A at tackle, addressing the issues that we had. And, Josh Simmons is a guy who, when he was on the field at Ohio State, a lot of people think that he was the best tackle in this draft, and the Chiefs have actually met with him. So there's an obvious connection there. And then we get to that final pick of the first round, and man, oh man, I know that you guys are probably noticing what's gone on here with James Pierce Jr. still on the board. And I think that despite my opinions of James Pierce Jr., I think that he's a player that people are kind of overthinking. A productive game record in the SEC for multiple years, a guy who really improved his run defense this year. He shows a lot of physicality, but there are rumors that James Pierce Jr. could be the big name in this draft that ends up falling deep into day 2. Like, that's a legit murmur coming out of the combine. Shout out Corey Kinnan. That's the guy who kind of put that report out there on Twitter. And I think that, looking back in recent years, Howie Roseman is the guy who is going to scoop up that big name player that's falling. And, they might have a need in Philadelphia at edge if Josh Sweat leaves. And James Pierce Jr. could just be sitting right here saying, yeah, if you take me, I'm going to have that big chip on my shoulder. There are rumors that he has the character concerns, but they took Jalen Carter a couple years back when he had very, very big character concerns. So I just think, if any team is going to take advantage of a talent falling farther than they should because of, different concerns and off-the-field stuff, it's going to be Philadelphia. And Howie might just do it again and laugh at the rest of the league for letting him get a guy like James Pierce. So yeah, the league might be doomed if we continue to let stuff like this happen. So yeah, this is the full first round post-combine mock draft. You see how some of these guys rose based on how they performed at the combine. Shamar Stewart, Omarion Hampton, Nicky Memwari, the most out of maybe anyone. And then guys like Matthew Golden. And because of that, we saw some of these bigger name SEC guys like Malachi Starks and James Pierce fall to contenders. And most importantly of all, because of the Matthew Stafford domino effect, we might see the Giants make that move up to the number 1 pick. And I think we really might see quarterbacks go in the top 2, even though I personally do not think that this is a draft where that should happen based on the prospects that Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are. Let me know how you guys would feel about all of these picks, how you would feel about the guy that I have your favorite team picking. I want to do more of these mock drafts leading up to the draft. I thought that this would be a good time to do one because just a lot of stuff changed this week. And with that said, thank you guys so much for watching. To all of you who watched all the way through, you are the absolute GOAT. Your support means a ton for me, and I will see you guys next time. Y'all have a great one.